Good morning. We're on Chapter 7 of Ingersoll Lockwood's 1900, or The Last President, which was written in 1896, and this is a fictional story of government that has a lot of connotations of what's happening lately, which is kind of making people look at it. So, in the previous chapters, fascism has taken over. For the good of the common people, the government will take over all the telegraph lines and the railways and the public utilities, which most of us know where that kind of thing leads to. So let's jump over there. And we'll begin at Chapter 7. The first year of the Silver administration was scarcely rounded up ere there began to be ugly rumors that the government was no longer able to hold the white metal at a parity with gold. "It is the work of Wall Street," cried the friends of the president. But wiser heads were shaken in contradiction, for they had watched the sowing of the white wind of unreason, and knew only too well that the whirlwind of folly must be reaped in due season. The country had been literally submerged by a silver flood which had poured in its argent waves into every nook and cranny of the republic, stimulating human endeavor to most unnatural and harmful vigor. Mad speculation stalked over the land. People sold what they should have clung to, and bought what they did not need. Manufacturers heaped up goods for which there was no demand, and farmers plowed where they had not drained, and drained where they were never fated to plow. The small dealer enlarged his business with more haste than judgment, and the widow drew her mite from the bank of savings to buy land on which she was destined never to set foot. The spirit of greed and gain lodged in every mind, and the common people, with a mad eagerness, loosened the strings of their leather purses to cast their hard-earned savings into wild schemes of profit. Every scrap and bit of the white metal that they could lay their hands on, spoons hollowed by the touch of lips long since closed in death, and cups and tankards from which grandsires had drunken, were bundled away to the mints to be coined into people's dollars. At the very first rumor of the slipping away of this trusted coin from its parity with gold, there was a fearful awakening. Getting that now. Like the start and the gasp of the miser who sees his hoarded treasure melting away from before his eyes, and he is not able to reach out and stay its going. Protest and expostulation, that's a big word, first. Then came groans and prayers, from which there was an easy road to curses. The working man threw off his cap and apron to rush upon the public square and demand his rights. Mobs ran together, processions formed, deputations hurried off to Washington, not on foot, like the Coxey army, but on the swift wings of the limited express. The common people were admitted to the bar of the House, their complaints patiently listened to, and reparation promised. Bills for increased revenue were hurriedly introduced, and new taxes were loaded upon the broad shoulders of the millionaires of the nation. New taxes. Taxes on checks, taxes on certificates of incorporation, taxes on deeds and mortgages, taxes on pleasure yachts, taxes on private parks and placences, taxes on wills of all property above $5,000 in value, taxes on all gifts of realty for and in consideration of natural love and affection, taxes on all passage tickets to foreign lands, and double taxes on the estates of the absentees on and after the lapse of 6 months. If they only knew what was going on now. There was doubling up, too, on the tariff on all important luxuries. For, as was said on the floor of Congress, if the silks and satins of American looms and the wines and tobacco of native growth are not good enough for my Lord of Wall Street, let him pay the difference and thank heaven that he can get them at that price. Well, to quiet the murmurs of the good people of the land, additional millions were placed to the credit of the Department of Public Works, and harbors were dredged out in 1 month only to fill up in the next. The new systems of improvement of interstate waterways were entered upon a scale of magnitude hitherto undreamed of. The commissioners for the distribution of public monies to farmers so impoverished as to be unable to work their lands were kept busy in placing pepper loans, where the need of them seemed to be the greatest, and to put a stop to the nefarious doings of money changers and traders in the misfortunes of the people. A statute was enacted making it a felony punishable with imprisonment for life for any person or corporate body to buy and sell government bonds or public funds, or deal them in with a view to draw gain or profit from their rise and fall in value. Well, but tried never so hard, the government found itself powerless to check the slow but steady decline in the value of the people's dollar. By midsummer it had fallen to 43 cents, and ere the fair Northland had wrapped itself like a scornful beauty in its autumn mantle of gold, the fondly trusted coin and sank to exactly 1/3 of the value of a standard gold dollar. People carried baskets in their arms filled with the now discredited coin. When they went abroad to pay a debt or make a purchase for the necessities of life, huge sacks of the white metal were flung at the door of the mortgage. When discharge was sought for a few $1,000s, yeah, let me read that again. Huge sacks of the white metal were flung at the door of the mortgagee when discharge was sought for a few $1,000s. Men servants accompanied their mistresses upon shopping tours to carry the necessary funds, and leather pockets took the place of the old-time muslin ones in male habiliments. Least the weight of 15 coins acquired to make up a $5 gold piece should tear the thin stuff and spill $1 at every step. Well, so the silver's not worth as much as gold never was. All day long in the large cities, huge trucks loaded with sacks of the coin rolled and rumbled over the pavement in the adjustment of the business balances of the day. The tradesman who called for his bill was met at the door with a coal scuttle or a nail keg filled with the needful amount, and on payday the working man took his eldest boy with him to tote the stuff home, while he carried the usual bundle of firewood. And strange to say, this dollar, once so beloved by the common people, parted with its very nature of riches and lay in heaps, unnoticed and unheeded on the shelf or table, until occasion arose to pay it out, which was done with a careless and contemptuous toss as if it were the iron money of the ancient Spartans. And Holy Writ, for once at least, was disproven and discredited, for the thief showed not the slightest inclination to break in and steal where these treasures had been laid upon earth, although the discs of white metal lie in full view on the table, like so many pewter platters or pieces of tinware. Men let debts run rather than call for them, and barter and exchange came in vogue again. Barter and exchange came in vogue again. I don't want your worthless money. Trade this for that. That sounds familiar too. The good housewife calling on her neighbor for a loan of flour or meal, promising in return the same in sugar or dried fruit whenever the need might arise. And still, the once magic discs of silver slipped slowly and silently downward, and ever downward in value and good name, until it almost seemed as if the people hated the very name of silver. Well, there you go. Chapter 8. The fateful year of '99, upon its coming in, found the Republic of Washington in dire and dangerous straits. The commercial and industrial boom had spent its force, and now the frightful evils of a debased currency, coupled with demoralizing effects of rampant paternalism, were gradually strangling the land to death. Capital, never timid and distrustful in such times, hid itself in safe deposit vaults or fled to Europe. Labor, although really hard-pressed and lacking the very necessities of life, was loud-mouthed and defiant. Socialism and anarchism found willing ears into which to pour their burning words of hatred and malevolence. And the consequence was that serious rioting broke out. And the consequence was that serious rioting broke out in the larger cities of the North, often taxing the capabilities of the local authorities to the utmost. It was spoken of abroad that violent dissensions had arisen in the cabinet, the young president given signs of a marked change of mind, and like many a man who has appealed to the darker passions of the human heart, he seemed almost ready to exclaim, "I stand alone. The spirits I have called up are no longer obedient to me. My country, oh my country, how willingly would I give my life for thee. If such a sacrifice I could restore thee to thy old-time prosperity." Yeah. Pause for thought on all this stuff. For first he began to realize with an intense spirit of sectionalism had entered into this revolutionary propaganda. Propaganda, there you go. He spoke of his fears to none save to his wise and prudent helpmate. "I trust you, beloved," she whispered as she pressed the broad, strong hands that held hers clasped. "Ay, dear one, but does my country?" came in almost a groan from the lips of the youthful ruler. Most evident was it that thus far the South had been the great gainer in the struggle for power. She had increased her strength in the Senate by 6 votes. She had regained her old-time prestige in the House. One of her most trusted sons was in the Speaker's chair, while another brilliant Southern led the administration forces on the floor. Born as she was for the brilliant exercise of intellectual vigor, the South was of that strain of blood which knows how to wear the kingly graces of power so as best to impress the common people. Many of the men of the North had been charmed and fascinated by this natural pomp and inborn demeanor of greatness, and had yielded to it. Not a month had gone by that this now dominant section had not made some new demand upon the country at large. Early in the session, at its request, the internal revenue tax, which had rested so long upon the tobacco crop of the South and poured so many millions of revenue into the national treasury, was wiped from the statute books with but a feeble protest from the North. But now the country was thrown into a state bordering upon frenzy by a new demand, which, although couched in calm and decorous sterns, nay, almost in the guise of a petition for long-delayed justice to hard-pressed and suffering brethren, had about it a suppressed yet unmistakable tone of conscious power and imperiousness which well became the leader who spoke for that glorious Southland to which this Union owes so much of its greatness and prestige, quote unquote. This is hard to read because it's written very strange. Said he, "Mr. Speaker, for nearly 30 years our people, although left impoverished by the conflict of the states, have given of their substance to salve the wounds and make green the old age of men who conquered us. We have paid this heavy tax, this fearful blood money, unmurmuringly. You have given us for our bold strike for liberty that God willed should not succeed. You have given us back our rights, opened the doors of these sacred halls to us, called us your brothers. But unlike noble Germany, who was content to exact a lump sum from La Belle France, and then bid her no peace and freedom from all further exactions, you have for nearly 30 years laid this humiliating war tax upon us, and thus forced us year in and year out to kiss the very hand that smote us. Are we human that we now cry against it? Are we men that we feel no tingle in our veins after these long years of punishment for no greater crime than that we love liberty better than the bonds of confederation laid upon us by our fathers? We appeal to you as our brothers and our countrymen. Lift this infamous tax from our land. Than which your great North is 10,000 times richer. Do one of two things. Either take our aged and decrepit soldiers by the hand and bless their last days with pensions from the treasury of our common country, for they were only wrong in that their causes failed. Or remove this hated tax and make such restitution of this blood money as shall seem just and equitable to your sober and better judgment." To say that this speech, of which the foregoing is but a brief extract, threw both houses of Congress into most violent disorder, but faintly describes its effect. Cries of treason, treason went up. Blows were exchanged, and hand-to-hand struggles took place in the galleries, followed by the flash of the dead Bowie and a crack of the ready pistol. The Republic was shaken to its very foundations. Throughout the North there was but a repetition of the scenes that followed the firing upon Sumter. Public meetings were held and resolutions passed calling upon the government to concentrate troops in and about Washington and prepare for the suppression of the Second Rebellion. But gradually this outbreak of popular indignation lost some of its strength and virulence, for it was easy to comprehend that nothing would be gained at this stage of the matter by meeting a violent and unlawful demand with violence and unwise counsels. Besides, what was it anyway but the idle threat of a certain clique of unscrupulous politicians? The Republic stood upon too firm a foundation to be shaken by mere appeals to the passions of the hour. To commit treason against our country called for an overt act. What had it to dread from the mere oratorical flash of a passing storm of feeling? It is hard to say what the young president thought of these scenes in Congress. So pale had he grown of late that a little more pallor would pass unnoted. But those who were wont to look upon his face in these troubled times report that in the short space of a few days the lines in his countenance deepened perceptibly, and that a firmer and stronger expression of willpower lurked in the corners of his wide mouth, overhung his square and massive chin, and accentuated the vibrations of his wide-open nostrils. He was under terrible strain. When he had caught up the scepter of power, it seemed a mere bubble in his strong grasp, but now it had grown strangely heavy, and there was a mysterious prickling at his brow, as if that crown of thorns which he had not willed should be set upon the heads of others were being pressed down in cruel hands upon his own. We'll leave it there. That's chapter 7 and 8. Go to chapter 9. Lots of stuff happening. So we can see in this work of fiction that, doesn't always work. Give everybody what they want, not what they need. So, till next time, we'll continue this story. It's getting really interesting. But stay tuned.